the ANC could collapse due to the fall of the Islamic regime in Iran. Here's how. Currently, Iran is experiencing anti-government protests, the likes of which have never been seen before. This has caused a lot of people to wonder whether or not the Islamic regime could indeed fall as a result of public outrage. But what people may not realize is that this could have crucial international implications as well, particularly in South Africa and particularly to the ANC. Now, before we explain exactly why the ANC could actually fall due to the fall of the Iranian government, it's important to understand the critical relationship between the two. But before we delve into this analysis, could I please remind you to subscribe to the channel? It's completely free, and all you have to do is click on the subscribe button below. Furthermore, for additional perks, consider becoming a Power Club member. You can do this by clicking on the join button below the video. Now let's begin. So in order to understand why the Islamic regime's fall could impact the ANC, it's important for us to understand the ANC's financial situation and how this connects to Iran. So I've created this timeline looking at recent ANC financials, and you'll see that in 2022, the ANC considered selling assets to cover 500 million rand in debt, and this is according to an ISGAP report. Unfortunately, there isn't any financial statements from the ANC that have been made publicly available, and so we have to go on third-party research in order to gather data surrounding their financial position. So fast forwarding to December 2023, and we saw that the ANC was facing a new debt of over 150 million rand, and this is according to The Citizen. So this debt stemmed from accumulating interest in a protracted legal battle that the ANC had with Ezulweni Investments, which the ANC contracted to produce election banners and campaign material leading up to the May 2019 general election. Ezulweni incurred debt to produce the goods ordered by the ANC and asserted that the party never paid its 102 million rand invoice. A legal battle ensued, with the Gauteng High Court ruling in Ezulweni's favor in September 2020. In June 2022, the entire Gauteng division upheld the judgment on appeal, while in May 2023, a writ of execution was issued allowing asset attachment. The ANC lodged an appeal to the Supreme Court of Appeals, claiming that the contract was fraudulent. However, the court rejected this appeal. On December the 4th, 2023, the sheriff of the Gauteng High Court actually attempted to seize assets at Luthuli House, which is the ANC's headquarters in Johannesburg. So a writ of execution, which was seen by the Daily Maverick, allowed the seizure of movable goods such as furniture, laptops, and printers. The sheriff was denied access by on-site security. The ANC approached the Constitutional Court, which surprisingly allowed a period of negotiations between the party and Ezulweni. So it's quite peculiar how the sheriff of the High Court, who is legally obliged to do so, approached Luthuli House to seize assets, yet the ANC security was able to deny access. Fast forwarding to December 22nd, and we saw that the ANC reached a settlement with Ezulweni over the 102 million rand debt plus interest. But then something very peculiar happened. You see, just 7 days later, on December the 29th, the South African government, which was then ruled solely by the ANC, remember this is before the GNU came into play, it filed its ICJ case against Israel, and according to ISGAP, the cost of the preliminary application was estimated to be 200 million rand, and so already things are not adding up. How is it that the ANC was able to fund a case of 200 million rand, and that's just the preliminary costs, where it actually had such enormous debts to cover? We know that in 2022, it had around 500 million rand in debt, and then of course the fresh 102 million rand, which actually skyrocketed to 150 due to the legal proceedings lodged against it. But then something even more peculiar happened after that. You see, in January 2024, we see how Cyril Ramaphosa claimed that the ANC had settled all of its debts without providing any specific details, which again is highly questionable. And then on March the 12th, 2024, probably the most damning act of all happened, whereby the IEC, which oversees elections in South Africa, launched an investigation on the ANC and its financial situation. So as it's explained, the ANC declared only 10 million rand in donations. Now, of course, 10 million rand in donations could never cover its debts and, of course, never cover the fresh funding needed for the ICJ case. But what's really peculiar is that to this day, the IEC has not revealed the findings of this investigation. Now, this is almost 2 years later. And so one wonders, what is going on? Why has the IEC failed to produce the findings of its investigation? Has the investigation actually been completed? And more importantly, where is the ANC getting its funding from? Now, there have been a lot of allegations stating that the ANC must have received this money from Iran. To date, we don't see any factual evidence that actually provides concrete links between the ANC and Iran and any sort of funding. However, we see the circumstantial evidence, and this certainly prompts us to ask questions of what's really going on. We also know how the ANC has been gravitating towards Iran from a diplomacy standpoint. We know that they're looking to conduct joint naval drills off the coast of Cape Town, and we've also seen how they've rushed to their aid, signing their condolence book after Iran and Israel entered into a 12-day war in mid-2025. But the ties get even deeper. So as we see on the second page here, MTN has long been involved in the Iranian market. Currently, there are a handful of legal disputes that MTN is involved in within Iran, but because no actual outcomes have been delivered, it's very hard to comment on these. Still, it's important to note that President Cyril Ramaphosa of the ANC served as the MTN chairman of the board from 2002 to 2013. But he isn't the only figure that's been involved in MTN. You see, Mcebisi Jonas currently serves as a non-executive chairman of MTN. He was selected by Ramaphosa to serve as a new envoy to Washington following Ibrahim Rasool's expulsion from the United States in March 2025. Strangely enough, we've never seen Jonas actually travel to the US. And so yet again, it's another issue that just seems to have been swept under the rug by the ANC. But previously, Jonas served as the Deputy Finance Minister of South Africa from 2014 to 2016 in what was then a solely ANC government. Now, of course, we know that whether or not finances are involved, the ANC has a diplomatic mission whereby it seems to be intent on siding with global South allies. And very quickly, we're seeing how the walls are caving in around them. Their good friend Russia has really been struggling to take on Ukraine, and we've seen how Ukraine has fought back much stronger and more valiantly than many expected. Clearly, they are not going to be too interested in prioritizing the ANC and that relationship. China has never really shown an interest in getting involved militarily, and we know from the trade deficit that South Africa runs with China that the only real interest that China has with South Africa is to basically extract whatever raw materials it can and sell cheap products from Temu and Shein to the South African market. And so there isn't really much help coming from there. We then have Venezuela and other communist and socialist governments, and we all know how the US has gone into Venezuela, captured Nicolas Maduro, and upended the government there. Finally, we see Iran, and right now, we see a revolution brewing within Iran, which could see the fall of the ANC's last true ally. So on January the 9th, it was reported how the Iranian protests have reached new heights. So here in this ABC News article, we see that at least 36 protesters have been killed in Iran and over 2,000 have been detained by regime forces. And this is according to the US-based human rights activist news agency. Now, it's important to note that these are just reported casualties. We don't know how many more could be that are so far unreported. Furthermore, we see how Iranians in over 100 cities and towns across the country have taken to the streets, shouting slogans against the regime and demanding greater rights in the largest protests challenging the regime since the Women Life Freedom Movement in 2022 and 2023, sparked by the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini. Demonstrators have been calling for the regime's downfall and systematic change as the first step to reclaiming freedom and dignity. We then see how the international influences are coming into play. So we see that the current protests are being escalated from outside forces, such as the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi from the previous dynasty. And he actually was deposed and exiled during the 1979 Iranian Islamic Revolution. And he urged the people to start chanting slogans on Thursday and Friday at 8 p.m. local time. Based on your response, I will announce the next calls to action, Pahlavi said. As protesters answered Pahlavi's call on Thursday night, internet and telephone access across Iran was cut, according to the Associated Press. Although it initially seemed that inflation had triggered these protests, we then realized pretty quickly that this actually wasn't the case and that these protests are quite different to anything that came before. It's seen that protesters have been employing slogans, as explained in the article, like "Death to Dictator" and "Death to Khamenei," referring to Sayyid Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran's Islamic Republic regime. Groups of protesters made up of university students, women, and ethnic minorities, including people from Kurdish and Turkish ethnicities, have gradually joined the protests from across the country since then. And so 12 days in, it really seems to be accelerating even more. Now, even with such crackdowns happening, it really seems as if, unlike previous years, the Iranian people are not backing down. So we see how phone service and internet was cut across the country. And footage seen by the Jerusalem Post and verified by BBC's Farsi channel appears to show the protesters set fire to an Islamic Republic of Iran broadcasting office in Isfahan during the protests. It's then explained how London-based anti-regime outlet Iran International reported that IRIB's Mashhad office was a focal point for protesters. And so this is really interesting because Mashhad is known as the birthplace of Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, as well as being the second largest city in the country after Tehran. We then see how footage from Tehran appeared to show vehicles overturned and burned during the protests, and how 2 Iranian regime officers were killed during the protests in the western Iranian city of Kermanshah. So this is very interesting because all of a sudden, even as the protests turn violent, the people are refusing to back down. I'd now like to share with you a very interesting piece of footage from the city of Abdanan, where it appears that police officers are actually defecting and joining the public protesters. Let's have a watch.
سیل جمعیت شهرستان آبدانان 15 دی‌ماه نیروی انتظامی با مردم آبدانان 15 دی‌ماه نیروی انتظامی همراه مردم.
And so, as we see from this footage, it really seems as if the Iranian Islamic regime is on its last legs. And this poses a very important question for the ANC. With your allies around the world falling one by one, it really seems as if you have nowhere else to run. Furthermore, it seems as if whatever classified funding sources you may have, well, they could also be compromised because after all, we're seeing that electorally, you're not getting the support you once did. Financially, we're seeing that the donations that you receive, as declared to the IEC, are nowhere near high enough in order to cover your rising debts. And of course, As the walls keep closing in on you and your global South allies, it seems that you are like a rat trapped in a corner who's lashing out, specifically at the United States, in a desperate attempt to survive. It really does seem that the ANC is in crisis mode, and South Africa should watch carefully. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please remember to subscribe to the channel for more content. Until next time, I'm Matthew Cohen, and this is the Power Pod.